Captain Harlan Grieve of the diplomatic vessel Excelsior leaned back in his chair, watching the silver-clad delegation from the planet Zorflon with a growing smirk. He had warned them. Oh, how he had warned them. The humans on board had prepared a banquet, a cornucopia of Earth's finest cuisine, and Captain Grieve had made it clear, some dishes pack a punch. Zorflonians, however, prided themselves on their impenetrable digestive systems. Their physiology, evolved on a nutrient-rich but flavorless diet, boasted an advanced enzymatic suite designed to neutralize toxins, break down caustic compounds, and endure harsh environmental conditions. "Our alimentary tract is flawless," their leader, Prefect Gorlash, had declared. "Your food will pose no challenge. We shall enjoy this mild curry of yours with the dignity befitting our advanced state." What followed was the culinary equivalent of a train derailment. The banquet table, laden with biryanis, raitas, naans, and curries, ranging from fragrant kormas to fiery vindalus, dazzled the aliens with its colors and aromas. The Zorflonians, each a towering figure of lavender-hued skin and glittering metallic crests, eagerly served themselves generous portions. "I suggest caution," Captain Grieve had said, nudging a tray of gulab jamuns closer to himself, anticipating the aftermath. "Start small." Gorlash scoffed, his glittering crest flexing in disdain. "Do not insult our capabilities, human. This milled curry smells harmless." That harmless curry, a tikka masala prepared by the Excelsior's resident chef Ravi Patel, had been slightly adjusted for alien palates. Ravi had toned down the heat considerably, though mild was a relative term when dealing with Earth's most enthusiastically spiced cuisine. With great ceremony, Gorlash and his team took their first bites. There was a moment of silence, then the chewing slowed, their eyes widened, their crests shimmered in alarming reds and oranges, and a symphony of raspy coughs broke out among the Zorflonians. "Is it hot in here?" one of them croaked, fanning their face with webbed fingers. "It is merely unexpected," Gorlash said, his voice strained. Beads of fluorescent liquid glistened on his forehead. He soldiered on, taking another bite with trembling determination. His companions weren't as valiant. Delegates collapsed into their chairs, tongues hanging out like overheated dogs. Another grabbed a jug of water and chugged it down, only to discover, too late, that water spread the burn. Ravi, observing from the kitchen doorway, whispered to Captain Grieve, "Should we stop them?" "No," Grieve said, stifling a chuckle. "They're proud. Let 'em work it out." Gorlash, after a heroic effort, slammed his fork down and declared, "It is delicious. I require more." His voice was raspy, as though his throat had been scoured with sandpaper. He ladled an even larger portion of curry onto his plate, the others following suit, emboldened by their leader's resolve. The humans exchanged knowing glances, but said nothing. For the next hour, the Zorflonians persevered. They devoured their plates, sweating and panting, yet marveling at the dynamic intensity of the flavors. Prefect Gorlash described the curry as an experience that transcends our prior understanding of nourishment. "We shall take samples back to Zorflon," he declared, wiping glowing perspiration from his face. "Our people must experience this miracle." Captain Grieve raised his glass in a toast, though inwardly he was already bracing for what would come next. 2 hours later, the Excelsior's alarms blared. "Captain, to the cargo deck immediately," came a panicked voice over the comms. Grieve arrived to find chaos. The Zorflonians were clustered near the ship's waste processing unit, their glittering crests now dulled and drooping. Gorlash himself was bent double, clutching his midsection. "Our systems are "Mm, compromised," he groaned. "What happened?" Grieve asked, though he already suspected the answer. Lieutenant Tessa Merrow, the ship's chief engineer, emerged from the crowd holding a data pad. "Captain, the Zorflonians' waste is incompatible with our sewage system. Their digestive process seems to have transformed the curry into, well, something highly corrosive and clog-inducing." "Be more specific." She hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "It's essentially a high-viscosity sludge that's emitting fumes potent enough to degrade the titanium pipes. The waste unit is completely blocked." "Impossible," Grulash wheezed, his breath shallow. "Our physiology is a masterpiece. Nothing can overwhelm it." "Clearly you haven't met Curry," Grieve muttered under his breath. "We are in agony," cried another Zorflonian, clutching at their abdomen. A chorus of agreement followed, punctuated by strange gurgling noises. Grieve turned to Tessa. "Options." She grimaced. "We'll need to purge the waste system manually. But first, we have to figure out how to stabilize their digestion. If this continues..." Boom! A muffled explosion rocked the deck, followed by the acrid stench of burning metal. "That was the secondary waste vent," Tessa said, wide-eyed. "It's ruptured." "I demand a solution!" Gorlash roared, though the effect was dampened by his pained expression and the small involuntary burp that followed. Grieve sighed. Ravi's got some explaining to do. As the Zorflonians doubled over in discomfort and the humans scrambled to prevent a full-blown sewage crisis, Captain Grieve shook his head. This was going to be a long night. The first thing Captain Harlan Grieve did was summon Ravi Patel to the chaos-stricken cargo deck. The ship's chef arrived quickly, still clutching a ladle and wiping his hands on a curry-stained apron. His eyes widened as he took in the scene, Zorflonics waving handheld analyzers at leaking pipes, and the distinct aroma of something foul wafting through the air. What happened?" Ravi asked, his voice trembling between confusion and mild terror. Grieve crossed his arms, his face a study in deadpan seriousness. "Your mild curry happened. You've apparently turned their digestive tracts into some kind of alien pressure cooker." Ravi blinked, genuinely puzzled. "But it wasn't even that spicy. I toned it way down. I used coconut milk and everything." Tessa Merrow, scanning a thick puddle of sludge creeping out from the waste vent, turned to glare at him. "Well, whatever you toned it down to, it's managed to create a chemical slurry that could double as starship fuel."
One of the Zorflonians, a delegate named Corlum, let out a weak groan. "The pain! It is both internal and existential."
Ravi looked from Corlum to the growing mess and back to Captain Grieve. "What do we do?" "You're the chef," Grieve said flatly. "Fix it." The first order of business was stabilizing the Zorflonians. Ravi, accompanied by the ship's medical officer, Dr. Alana White, set up a triage area in the dining hall. The afflicted aliens were sprawled across tables and chairs, their crests dim and their breathing labored. Dr. White scanned Gorlash with a hand-held medical scanner, frowning as the readings came through. Their bodies are trying to process the spices as if they're a toxin, but the breakdown process is messy. It's producing compounds that their systems can't handle. "And the pipes?" Grieve asked, standing nearby. "Whatever's coming out of them is only half digested," she replied. "It's full of unprocessed lipids and enzymes that react violently with metal." Ravi scratched his head, looking sheepish. "So, their bodies can't fully digest the curry?" "Not even close," Dr. White confirmed. I told them to start small, Grieve muttered. Meanwhile, Tessa and her engineering team were working feverishly on the waste system. The ruptured vent was temporarily patched, but the clog remained, a stubborn plug of alien biosludge that was slowly expanding under pressure. Every attempt to clear it only seemed to make things worse. As hours dragged on, the situation reached new lows. The Zorflonians, while valiantly trying to maintain their dignity, began to exhibit increasingly bizarre side effects. One delegate developed uncontrollable hiccups that emitted tiny sparks of bioluminescent gas. Another claimed to experience time at twice the normal speed, though this was quickly dismissed as delirium. Gorlash, still trying to project an air of leadership, insisted on addressing the crisis. "We Zorflonians are a proud people," he declared, though his voice was hoarse and punctuated by occasional gurgles. "We shall endure." Grieve raised an eyebrow. "You're currently incapacitated by curry." "We shall endure," Gorlash repeated, though the attempt at grandeur was somewhat undermined by a loud and unsettling stomach noise. Ravi eventually concocted a plan. Drawing from his deep knowledge of spices and their effects, he whipped up a yogurt-based mixture infused with mild herbs to act as a coolant for the Zorflonian digestive system. He approached Gorlash with a bowl of the creamy mixture, offering it like a peace treaty. "What is this?" Gorlash asked suspiciously. "It's Reta," Ravi said. "It'll help calm the burn." Gorlash regarded the bowl with suspicion, but spurred on by desperation, took a cautious sip. A moment passed, then his eyes widened. "It is soothing." He grabbed the bowl and chugged the rest, glowing beads of sweat cascading down his face. "More!" The other Zorflonians, seeing their leader's relief, followed suit. Within minutes, the dining hall transformed from a scene of alien agony into one of quiet recovery. The Zorflonians sighed in unison, their crests regaining a hint of their usual luster. Grieve clapped Ravi on the back. "You might have just saved an interstellar alliance." "Don't thank me yet," Ravi replied grimly. "We still have the clog to deal with." Back at the waste unit, Tessa Merrow and her team had made little progress. They'd tried using standard cleaning agents, mechanical augers, and even sonic vibrations to break down the sludge, but nothing worked. Every method only seemed to further agitate the substance, which had begun to bubble ominously. "This is a nightmare," Tessa said, wiping sweat from her brow. Ravi, still energized from his Raita triumph, arrived on the scene carrying a bucket of his yogurt mixture. "What if we use this?" Tessa stared at him. "You want me to pour yogurt into the waste system?" "It neutralized the spice for them," Ravi argued. "Maybe it can do the same for whatever's in there." Grieve shrugged. "We're out of better ideas." Reluctantly, Tessa allowed Ravi to pour the mixture into the waste intake. They watched anxiously as it disappeared into the pipes, waiting for any sign of success or disaster. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the faint gurgling sounds from within the pipes began to fade. The sludge, reacting with the yogurt, started to break down into a less volatile, more manageable substance. The pressure in the system dropped, and the ominous bubbling ceased. Tessa exhaled in relief. "I can't believe that worked." "Never underestimate the power of good yogurt," Ravi said with a grin. By the end of the day, the crisis was under control. The Zorflonians, though still shaken, had recovered enough to resume their diplomatic duties. Prefect Gorlash, humbled but determined, approached Captain Grieve to offer his gratitude. "Human cuisine," he said solemnly, "is not to be taken lightly." Grieve smiled. "Glad you learned something from all this." Gorlash hesitated, then added, "We would still like to take some of this curry back to Zorflon for further study." Ravi, overhearing this, dropped the spoon he'd been holding. You want more? For scientific purposes, Gorlesh clarified. Though perhaps we will consume it in moderation. As the Zorflonians departed laden with carefully labeled containers of curry and raita, Grieve shook his head in amusement. We might have just introduced an interstellar spice trade. And clogged a few more alien pipes along the way, Rafi added. Tessa groaned. Next time I'm putting a warning label on everything you make. And with that, the Excelsior resumed its journey, carrying with it the memory of a diplomatic mission that nearly went down the drain. Literally. As the Excelsior returned to its usual operations, a deceptive calm settled over the ship. The Zorflonians had returned to their vessel, escorted by a cargo bay full of curry, yogurt, and a diplomatic handshake that almost masked the absurdity of the past 24 hours. Captain Grieve leaned against the observation deck's railing, watching the stars slip by, when Ravi walked in, looking slightly uneasy. You look too relaxed, Ravi said, pointing his ladle, an implement he seemed to carry everywhere now, at Grieve. That's because we survived, Grieve replied. The curry crisis is over. Is it, though? Ravi asked, his voice heavy with foreboding. Tess has been poking at the waste system logs. Something weird is going on. Grieve straightened. Define weird. Well, we thought the clog was fully cleared, right? Ravi said. Turns out some residual sludge made it into the auxiliary waste tanks before we fixed the pipes. And now the auxiliary tanks are mutating. Mutating? Grieve frowned. Sludge doesn't mutate. This sludge does, Ravi said. Tessa said it's reacting with trace elements of our ship's cleaning solvents. She called it bioactive escalation. I call it we're doomed. At that moment, the ship's comms blared, and Tessa's voice crackled through. Captain, you need to come down to engineering, right now. Grieve arrived to find the auxiliary waste tank glowing ominously. The usual dull gray of the tank's surface was now streaked with pulsing veins of iridescent green. Tessa and her team were gathered around it, looking like they'd rather be anywhere else. What the hell am I looking at? Grieve asked. Tessa waved a scanner at the tank. The residual sludge from the Zorfloniums has combined with our cleaning agents to create a compound that's alive, for lack of a better term. It's metabolizing the solvents and producing heat. If we don't vent this thing soon, it's going to blow. Ravi peered at the glowing tank. So, curry made sentient goo? Tessa shot him a glare. Don't call it that, but yes, your curry is, indirectly, responsible for sentient goo. Grieve pinched the bridge of his nose. Please tell me you have a plan. I do, Tessa said, but it's risky. We need to eject the entire auxiliary tank into space. The problem is, the ejection system isn't designed for bioactive materials. If we mess up, this stuff could end up contaminating the ship. Or worse, Rabi added, the galaxy. Green stared at the tank, watching as the glowing veins pulsed in what felt like an unsettlingly deliberate rhythm. All right, he said. Let's get this thing off the ship. Oh, sorry, I hadn't slammed the door back there. The plan was straightforward in theory, but nerve-wracking in execution. Tessa and her team rigged up a manual override to the auxiliary ejection system, while Ravi and Dr. White prepared containment measures in case of a leak. Meanwhile, Grieve coordinated with the bridge to ensure the ship was far from any populated systems during the procedure.
As the countdown to the ejection began, the glowing tank seemed to react. The pulsating veins quickened, and faint vibrations hummed through the floor.
Is it supposed to be doing that? Ravi asked nervously. No, Tessa said through gritted teeth. And if it starts singing, I'm leaving. The countdown reached 0 and Tessa hit the release button. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a shuddering jolt, the auxiliary tank detached from the ship and drifted into space, the glowing mass inside flickering like an eerie lantern. Oh, ejection complete, Tessa said, exhaling in relief. The containment field is holding. On the observation deck, Grieve and Ravi watched as the tank floated away, its glow gradually dimming as it receded into the void. Think that's the last we'll see of it? Ravi asked. Grieve chuckled. With our luck, probably not. Just as they began to relax, an alert sounded across the ship. The bridge officer's voice came through the comms. Captain, we're picking up a signal. It's coming from the tank. Grieve and Ravi exchanged a look. Did you say signal? Grieve asked. Yes, sir, the officer confirmed. It's emitting a series of pulses, almost like Morse code. Grieve groaned. Of course it is. Back on the bridge, the crew analyzed the signal. It was irregular, erratic, but unmistakably deliberate. Tessa confirmed that the bioactive compound had somehow adapted itself into a primitive form of communication. It's not just alive, she said grimly. It's trying to talk. Talk? Ravi said, incredulous. With what brain? It doesn't need a brain, Dr. White explained. It's reacting to stimuli and evolving rapidly. It's mimicking intelligence. The message, once deciphered, was short but chilling. More spice. Grieve stared at the translation, then at Ravi. What did you do? I made curry, Ravi protested. I didn't teach it to crave more. The glowing tank began to pulse again on the external monitors, its light intensifying. The crew watched in stunned silence as the tank started to change shape, expanding and contracting as though it were breathing. Captain, the bridge officer said nervously, the tank's heat signature's spiking. It's not stable. Graves' jaw tightened. Prepare to destroy it. But it's technically alive? Dr. White protested. It could be a new life form. It's also trying to melt our waste pipes and demand more curry, Grieve snapped. We're not negotiating with a sentient spice byproduct. The ship's weapons systems locked onto the tank, and with a single blast, it was obliterated. A bright flash lit up the observation deck, and then it was gone, leaving only silence. In the aftermath, the crew returned to their duties, shaken but relieved. Ravi, however, couldn't shake the guilt. Do you think we just destroyed the universe's first spice-based life form? He asked Grieve. Grieve sighed. Maybe. But if we did, it was the universe's first and last attempt at creating a chili-based superorganism. Let's call it a win. Ravi nodded, though he couldn't help but feel a pang of regret. Next time I'll stick to plain toast. Grieve smirked. Next time, warn the aliens, and don't ever call your curry mild again. The Excelsior settled back into its routine, though the memory of the curry incident, as it had come to be known, lingered in every corner of the ship. For a day or two, things seemed blessedly uneventful. The Zorflonians were long gone, the auxiliary waste tank had been vaporized, and Captain Grieve even managed to get through a morning report without a single mention of pipes, sludge, or yogurt. Then the distress call came. Unidentified vessel requesting assistance, the comms officer announced. They're hailing us, Captain. Grieve, sitting in the command chair, frowned. Put it through. The view screen flickered to life, revealing the familiar face of Prefect Gorlash. His crest, while slightly less radiant than usual, was still shimmering with authority. Captain Grieve, Gorlash began. his voice betraying an edge of discomfort. "We require your assistance." Grieve's brow furrowed. "What happened? You seemed fine when you left." Garash hesitated, then sighed. "It appears we underestimated the potency of your curry." "Underestimated how?" Grieve asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted the answer. The image on the view screen shifted, showing the interior of the Zorflonian vessel. Brightly glowing pipes snaked through the walls, many of them bulging alarmingly. Engineers scrambled around, their tools clanking as they tried to contain what looked like fluorescent sludge oozing from several ruptures. One of them slipped and fell, landing in a puddle that hissed ominously as it ate through the floor. "Our waste systems," Gorlash explained, "have been entirely overwhelmed. The curry samples we brought aboard were consumed in great enthusiasm by our crew. They believed themselves prepared. They were not." Ravi, who had been quietly observing from the back of the bridge, groaned and buried his face in his hands. "Why do they keep eating it?" "They said it was delicious," Gorlash admitted, "and addictive." Grieve muttered something under his breath before addressing Gorlash again. "Let me guess. Your waste pipes are clogged. Your ship is breaking apart, and you want us to fix it?" "Yes," Gorlash said, his tone pained. "We will owe you a great debt." Grieve turned to Tessa, who was already glaring at him. "No," she said firmly. "Absolutely not. We just cleaned up our own ship. I'm not dealing with their mess, too." "Tessa," Grieve said, "this could be an opportunity." "An opportunity to what?" she snapped. "Build an interstellar plumbing business?" "To show we're willing to help," Grieve countered, "even when the problem is apparently their fault." Tessa threw up her hands in exasperation. "Fine, but if this goes south, I'm dumping the entire Zorflonian delegation into the nearest black hole." The crew of the Excelsior arrived aboard the Zorflonian ship to a scene that could only be described as catastrophic. The sludge had spread to nearly every major system, leaving the air tinged with an acrid, spicy smell. Some parts of the ship had been sealed off entirely, the sludge forming impassable barriers. Tessa immediately got to work assessing the damage. Ravi, guilt-stricken but determined to help, joined her, armed with a bucket of Reta and a sprayer. "Let's neutralize what we can," he said, trying to sound confident. "Try not to make it worse," Tessa muttered. Meanwhile, Grieve and Gorlash stood in what passed for the Zorflonian command center, watching the chaos unfold on the monitors. "I must confess," Gorlash said, his voice tinged with regret. "We believed ourselves superior in every way. Your cuisine has humbled us." Grieve gave him a wry smile. "Humility looks good on you, Prefect." As the cleanup progressed, Ravi's yogurt-based solution once again proved effective. The team sprayed it liberally on the worst of the sludge, breaking it down into less volatile compounds. Tessa and her engineers worked tirelessly to reinforce the damaged pipes, replacing sections that had been eaten away by the corrosive mess. Despite their progress, the situation took a turn for the worse when one of the sealed-off sections of the ship began to emit a low, ominous hum. Scanners revealed a massive buildup of pressure within the sludge-filled pipes. A ticking time bomb. "If that pressure releases," Tessa warned, "it'll blow half their ship apart." "Can we vent it into space?" Grieve asked. "Not safely," Tessa replied. "The valves are completely clogged. We'd need to manually release the pressure." "Manually?" Ravi said, looking horrified. You mean someone has to go in there?" Tessa nodded grimly. "In a reinforced suit, with a containment kit. It's dangerous, but it's the only way." "I'll go," Ravi said suddenly. Everyone turned to stare at him. "You?" Tessa asked, incredulous. "Why?" This is my fault, Ravi said, straightening his shoulders. I made the curry. I should be the one to fix it. Grieve clapped him on the shoulder. That's noble, Ravi. Stupid, but noble. Let's suit you up. Ravi entered the sealed-off section of the ship wearing a bulky environmental suit, the containment kit strapped to his back. The sludge-coated pipes pulsed around him, the hum growing louder with each step. You're doing great, Tessa's voice crackled over the comms. Just don't touch anything you don't have to. No promises, Ravi muttered, gripping a manual release valve with trembling hands. He carefully attached the containment kit, following Tessa's instructions. As he turned the valve, a jet of glowing sludge sprayed out, but the containment kit did its job, capturing the substance before it could spread. The pressure readings began to drop, and the hum subsided. I think it's working, Ravi said, relief flooding his voice. You're not dead yet, so that's a good sign, Tessa replied. Hours later, the crisis was finally under control. The Zorflonian ship, while still in need of significant repairs, was no longer in danger of exploding. Prefect Gorlash personally thanked Captain Grieve and his crew, though his gratitude was tinged with lingering embarrassment. We shall approach Earth cuisine with far greater caution in the future, Garash said solemnly. Grieve smirked. Good idea. Maybe start with a salad next time. As the Excelsior departed, Ravi slumped into a chair in the galley, exhausted but triumphant. Well, he said, I think I've officially retired from making curry. Grieve poured him a glass of water and sat down beside him. You know, he said, this whole mess started because you wanted to impress some aliens with Earth food. Yeah, Ravi admitted, and Grieve raised his glass in a toast. Mission accomplished. They clinked glasses, laughing as the ship carried them toward their next adventure.